Alright everyone, now it's Venezuela time, back to our real socialist workers' paradise a la Bernie Sanders. By the way, they are democratic socialists, the same as Bernie is. They, of course, have no problem saying this. He has no problem admitting that that's what he is, although he differentiates himself because he's more along the lines of Scandinavia, a system that supposedly works really well. Talk to me in 10 years. Now, Venezuela's crisis is getting worse. That is that Citgo may be leaving the country. That means that they may soon lose the capability of refining any of their own oil or exporting the crude very easily to the United States. This would hammer their economy over the head to the tune of like what, 5% of their GDP or something. What economy? I mean, it's already non-functional, or at least severely dysfunctional. It's got an F- in terms of functionality. What more can possibly be done by the Maduro regime to try to stabilize things? The only thing that can be done is Maduro stepping down and allowing Guaido, who's also a socialist anyway, so it doesn't really matter, take control in order to suck on the Western teat. Because let's say that tomorrow the U.S. were to remove all sanctions, like the ones that we imposed only this year. So people proclaiming that the U.S. is responsible for the problems there, they're wrong. They're clearly objectively wrong. We hadn't sanctioned them. They were already collapsing. We sanctioned them because of Maduro's actions towards crowds of protesters. It is sensible. It is a legitimate remark. Yes, the U.S. government is actually being above board with that one, which is phenomenally funny. Because usually things are more opaque than that. This one's pretty straightforward. But here's the thing. Even if we were to remove all sanctions tomorrow, it wouldn't make any difference. Venezuela would still be flatlined. The amount of debt to GDP ratio there means that they would never pay it off. The country will collapse. That is now certain. Hyperinflation has taken hold. Their currency lost a third of its value in a single month. And it's already hyperinflated. That's pretty bad. Essentially, their bolivar there, their Venezuelan bolivar, is worth nothing. It's not worth the paper that it's printed on. The act of actually printing it loses the nation money at this point. It's to the point where if you use that cash as tinder, if you bleach it and use it for drawing pads, if you use it as toilet paper, whatever use you use it for is better than using it as a medium of exchange. I have a feeling that for the most part people there, except in sort of the Potemkin village setup of Central Caracas or something, I have a feeling that most people just do black market shit and just trade directly. Oh yeah, who needs the fucking currency? There's no point to it. It's not worth anything. Or they just scrawl a few extra zeros on it and just say, well, we're just going to add our own uninflated numbers or something, some crazy shit. Now, why not? I know for a while there, a lot of Venezuelans were RuneScaping and grinding for gold on RuneScape in order to make money. Like literally, they were grinding on RuneScape, getting bonds, selling those bonds for real-world currency, and that was actually a legit use of their time. It wasn't until the electrical system in Venezuela got fucked that sort of stopped. Venezuela tried to unleash its own petro-backed crypto that fell flat. I haven't heard anything else about it. I thought about buying a bunch at first. In fact, it could be a sound investment. Let me tell you one reason why. It's worthless. But the thing is that if Venezuela restructures and the crypto continues to stay in full force, it could skyrocket. So the crypto you're spending $1 a piece or whatever fucking amount it is on could be worth considerably more down the road. Not giving you financial advice, but it's a possible way to make money. Maybe. Unless it gets sanctioned by the U.S., in which case you lose everything. So keep that in mind when you make any risky investment. At this point, if you've got any money in Venezuela or any Venezuelan ally, it's probably a problem. But Citgo is now subject to a ruling by a U.S. court. See, what happened is that Maduro nationalized a bunch of shit, and now they're saying, well, we're going to seize your assets in the U.S. In order to compensate. They lost the case. And they've got like how many billions of assets in the United States? So it'll more than cover the 1.5 billion, I think it was, that Maduro's regime directly owes. Now, because what they've done is declare that branch of Citgo, like the Venezuelan assets, it's no different than the Maduro regime itself. It's the same fucking thing because they've nationalized it so heavily. Maduro's done this over and over again. Didn't he nationalize some Coca-Cola factory for a while? And a bunch of automotive manufacturers? Basically, You see a USSR-style situation looming. What's happened is that anything that becomes inconvenient, if it's a business, it gets nationalized. If it's a person, it gets either shot, tortured, or forced out of the country. And so Maduro is simply trying to slowly prune out everything that he finds inconvenient. The problem being that's losing him money, and it's losing him people, and it's also losing him diplomatic leverage. At some point, diplomatically, it'll become impossible for a nation like Russia to, number one, economically prop him up because of the debt load. Number two, diplomatically deal with supporting him. Because at some point it becomes too politically inconvenient and they get hemorrhaged off, and then Guaido takes over, and the only thing that he's going to be able to do, because he's still a socialist, is beg for Western money. He's going to do to the United States what Maduro does to Russia, beg. Which is what he's doing. This is what's caused by socialism. Essentially, eventually you have to beg. The little people beg the government. The government, once it's collapsing, begs a bigger government. That's what socialism does. It's a cancer on a country and slowly saps the life out of it. And it's real socialism. We need to keep in mind that this is the sort of bullshit that people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders want in the United States. And yeah, I mean that in the most literal sense. Bernie Sanders thing is we're one welfare program away from utopia. Yeah, and then when utopia is not achieved, you'll want one more, and then one more, and eventually you're paying a 60-70% tax rate. Everything's publicly owned. Private ownership is actively discouraged, and you lead to a culture of decadence and laziness. Yeah, no thanks. No thanks. I'd like to stick with at least the hybrid interventionist system we have now, which has its own fucking problems. The U.S. has plenty of problems, most of which can be solved by getting government back out of things. Venezuela is never going to solve its problem unless it collapses completely. The sad truth is that the debt amount, the hyperinflation, the lack of trust in government by its own people, the lack of diplomatic sway by other governments towards the Maduro regime is so stark, is so terrible at this point, that getting rid of Maduro himself won't do anything. When the opposition holds talks, and was it Barbados or some shit, when they hold talks with Maduro, yes, Maduro, who still maintains the military, is going to bow down before Guaido, switch over to someone else's socialism anyway, just so that they can switch from Russia to the United States and fundamentally change nothing else. Oh, maybe we'll denationalize a few businesses. Well, then what'll happen is that you've got a million conspiracy theories about Guaido being some sort of evil capitalist, which is funny because he's a fucking socialist, self-proclaimed and always has been by the Maduro regime. What'll happen is he'll try to denationalize a couple businesses and people will riot. All of the red clothes wearers, the Che Guevara fans, will riot in the streets and start burning shop fronts because they're like, oh my god, capitalism is taking hold in our socialist utopia. No, just go back to the way things were under Chavez. They were so much better. Yeah, because the centrality that you created in a socialized system hadn't yet destroyed your economy. The seed was already planted by Chavez years before Maduro took hold. He planted the seed, and it got watered, and it sprouts. Maduro takes over. He just keeps being the friendly gardener of the red tree of socialism, which then fucking poisons the land and kills everybody, which is what it's doing in Venezuela. And it's going to keep happening. A better solution would be this. You need Guaido out. You need Maduro out. You need all the socialists out. You need capitalist libertarians to take over, get rid of all of the nationalization and regulation within the country, and then they're going to have to use foreign investment. Yeah, you're going to have to make it a paradise of investors in order to develop any sort of domestic economy. Over time, you will pay off the debt. It'll get restructured. It'll get written off. And then you can start to exploit your energy resources more efficiently, and then you can slowly, de-invest. You can sort of push them aside, allow native investment by people who have made it in a deregulated environment, which they will. You'll have capitalists growing up in Venezuela itself, and then very soon you'll be a developed country. Venezuela would be a first world nation if they were to do this. It'd take a while. It'd take 20 or 30 uninterrupted years of growth, which would be difficult. The other problem is this. This is the other problem for Venezuela. Well, there are two of them. One problem is that if they do that, even if it's being successful, people, this low attention span individuals might riot anyway because they're so used to socialism. Then they destroy whatever you have created, re-enslave people, and the whole cycle starts over again. The other problem is the fact that Venezuela's main export is crude oil. What do we know about the world? Peak oil is a myth. There's plenty more to exploit for the next 100 years. So, it's no longer really a unique declining resource. It's also getting less important for a lot of the people who would buy it. They're investing in solar, they're investing in wind, they're using natural gas like we do in the United States increasingly. Oil is less and less important. Yeah, it's still an important export, it's still valuable, but it's not as valuable as it was. It's very funny to see people proclaim, well, in another year it'll spike, be worth 10 times as much, buy oil now. Maybe. Temporarily, then before it crashes again. Maybe OPEC gets involved and decides to kill itself just to spite the United States and Russia by making fuel worth nothing. I don't know why they would bother to do that. Trump, by the way, marginally successful in getting them to play nice, mainly because of military reasons. I think it has to do with the Yemen conflict more than anything else, involving Saudi Arabia, but we'll see about how that ends up playing out. I think, didn't a rocket just kill a bunch of people in some city on the border there? Like the Houthi rebels fired some sort of rockets and killed like 20 people. Very sad times. That's about all. Peace out.